Alexander Hamilton, 1790. The men who built America's $38 trillion debt monster no one can stop. Imagine a number so massive that if you started counting $1 per second, it would take you over 1 million years to reach it. That's America's national debt right now. $38 trillion, growing by $70,000 every single second you're watching this video. But here's what nobody tells you. This wasn't an accident. This monster was deliberately created by presidents and policymakers who made calculated choices that are now threatening to destroy the American economy. And the clock is ticking. Our story begins in 1790 with Alexander Hamilton, America's first Treasury Secretary. The Revolutionary War left the young nation with $80 million in debt. Most founding fathers, including Thomas Jefferson, wanted to pay it off immediately. Jefferson called it the greatest of dangers to be feared. But Hamilton had a different vision. He proposed something revolutionary. Don't pay off the debt. Fund it permanently. His plan was to consolidate all federal and state debts, issue new bonds, and only pay the interest, deferring principal payment indefinitely. He believed a national debt, if not excessive, would be a national blessing. His reasoning, a permanent debt would give wealthy investors a stake in the federal government's success and establish America's creditworthiness internationally. Jefferson was furious, but Hamilton won. And in that moment, the seed of our $38 trillion problem was planted. The concept that national debt wasn't something to eliminate, but something to manage permanently, became American policy. For over a century, most presidents minimized debt. Then came Franklin Roosevelt and the Great Depression. When FDR took office in 1933, unemployment hit 25%. Traditional theory said balance the budget, but Roosevelt made a radical choice: spend massively to save the economy, even if it exploded the debt.
The New Deal programs cost billions. National debt jumped from $22 billion in 1933 to $33 billion by 1936. But that was nothing compared to World War II, which cost over $300 billion. By 1945, the debt had skyrocketed to $258 billion, more than 10 times what it was when Roosevelt took office. The debt-to-GDP ratio exceeded 100% for the first time. But America won the war and avoided economic collapse. The precedent was set. Deficit spending during crises wasn't just acceptable, it was necessary. The problem? Future presidents would use this logic even without real emergencies. After World War II, America's debt actually shrank to just 26% of GDP. By 1980, then came Ronald Reagan with a promise that changed everything: massive tax cuts that would supposedly pay for themselves through economic growth. Reagan slashed the top tax rate from 70% to 28%. The result? The national debt tripled from $998 billion to $2.85 trillion during his presidency. America went from the world's largest creditor nation to its largest debtor nation. The promised economic boom didn't generate enough revenue to offset the cuts, not even close. George W. Bush continued the pattern. He inherited budget surpluses and immediately pushed through massive tax cuts. Then came 2 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, costing over $2 trillion. Unlike every previous American war, these weren't paid for through tax increases, they went entirely on the credit card. Bush added $6.1 trillion to the debt, a 105% increase.
Donald Trump accelerated it further. His 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act slashed corporate tax rates and is projected to add $2 trillion over 10 years. Combined with COVID spending, Trump added over $8 trillion in just 4 years without fighting a world war. Here's the stunning reality. According to the Center for American Progress, tax cuts from Republican administrations are responsible for 90% of the debt increase when you exclude one-time crisis spending. Without Reagan's, Bush's, and Trump's tax cuts, America's debt as a percentage of GDP would actually be declining right now. Barack Obama's presidency saw debt rise from $10.6 trillion to $19.9 trillion, but he inherited the worst financial crisis since the Depression. The economy was losing 800,000 jobs monthly. His stimulus added about $2 trillion, but economists debate how much was his choice versus inheritance from the crisis and extended Bush tax cuts. The national debt crossed $38 trillion in October 2025. That's larger than China and Japan's economies combined, representing over 120% of America's annual economic output. But here's the real nightmare: the interest payments. In fiscal year 2024, America paid $1.1 trillion just in interest. That's more than national defense, more than Medicare. Over the next decade, we're projected to spend $14 trillion on interest alone. $14 trillion that won't go to schools, infrastructure, healthcare, or anything productive. Just interest to bondholders. And here's the vicious cycle. As debt grows, interest rates rise because investors demand greater returns. Higher rates mean bigger payments. Bigger payments mean more borrowing. More borrowing means higher rates. It's a debt spiral, and we're in it. Credit agencies are sounding alarms. Moody's downgraded the U.S. credit rating in 2025. Fitch and Standard & Poor's did the same previously. When the world loses faith in American debt, consequences ripple globally. What happens when this explodes? Economists sketch several scenarios, none pretty. Scenario 1, a fiscal crisis. Investors lose confidence in America's debt management. Interest rates spike dramatically. The government can't afford to roll over debt. Default becomes possible. The dollar plummets, global markets crater. An economic catastrophe making 2008 look minor. Scenario 2, the slow death. No sudden crash, but growing interest payments consume the budget. Spending on defense, education, infrastructure gets crowded out. Economic growth crawls. Wages stagnate. Living standards gradually decline over decades. Scenario 3, hyperinflation. If the government prints money to escape debt, the dollar collapses. Your savings become worthless. Prices explode. Social Security lags real costs. Retirees' living standards evaporate. Which scenario? Nobody knows, but Penn Wharton budget model researchers estimate that under current policies, financial markets cannot sustain more than 20 years of accumulated deficits. 20 years. That's our window before the mathematics become impossible to escape. Here's the brutal truth politicians won't tell you. Fixing this requires either massive tax increases, dramatic cuts to Social Security and Medicare, or both. There's no magic solution. No free lunch. Alexander Hamilton created a system where debt could be a tool of power. Roosevelt proved deficit spending could save economies in crisis. But we forgot Hamilton said debt shouldn't be excessive. We forgot Roosevelt borrowed only during actual emergencies. Now we borrow trillions during expansions. We cut taxes while fighting wars. We add spending without payment plans. And the bill is coming due. $38 trillion, growing by 70,000 per second, with a 20-year window before mathematics become impossible to escape. The men who built this monster are dead, but we're the ones paying the price.
Will we act before it's too late? Or will we be the generation that crashes the American economy under the weight of our own debt? The clock is ticking.